digital programming at the Central Bank of Barbados within the Digital Transformation Unit. And Sheryl is here to share a journey that the bank has had around digital transformation and how they're evolving and handling both the challenges and delivering the improved experiences for all the stakeholders. So I'd like to invite Mrs. Sheryl Peter-Kirton to the stage.
Good morning. I think I might need the clicker. Thank you to Fujitsu for inviting us to share our journey. While we wait on the clicker, I'll give you one or two stories. The word activate now, when I heard persons saying it, I'll be honest, my governor came to mind. My governor is what I believe to be a digital leader, and he's definitely biased for action. He joined us in March of 2023, and when I share the journey, what I would say is the first thing he said was he wanted a paperless bank. So I want you to think in the back of your minds with everything about that paperless bank. And every time you hear paperless bank, I want you to hear the word activate now, because that in my head is what he wants us to do right away. Let me also kind of benchmark from what Deputy Governor mentioned, which is that these opinions are my own and not necessarily aligned with the central bank. So this is really me sharing my perspective of our journey over the last few years. So what we try to do is to pull all the varied thoughts into one graphic with different areas. Now, what you would notice at the base in the red boxes, don't get too excited. I'm speaking of the internal journey, but we do have to take into consideration the context of where the bank is going, right? So around 2017, 2018, we launched our regulatory sandbox. During COVID, we launched our Forex online so that our citizens could apply for foreign exchange through a fully end-to-end process, digitalizing that experience. And that became critical when there was one sense of urgency. And I think we all know it was mentioned already this morning, COVID. And if you haven't already heard, then I think my governor would be disappointed. We are launching BIMPay, and the target date is March of 2026. And if you're thinking of Activate Now, the slogan for BIMPay is, anybody knows it? Because instant matters. So there's a certain theme that I hear coming out. But let me share our journey. So we're going to start at the end, so I'm going to jump all over the place in a little bit. But in 2024, we launched our digitization center. And that was exciting to us because that also signified our full utilization of our enterprise content management system that we developed, we implemented, and we are in the process of adopting in partnership with Fujitsu. Now, what I would like to say is on September 10th, we launched the center, and Governor Greenidge remarked that it would fulfill a key strategic objective of a paperless environment and marked another milestone in the mission to modernize and transform the bank. Now, at the time we launched, it was our vision that the digitization center would be open from 8 to 4. During his opening remarks, the governor envisioned a 24-hour service. So again, you hear Activate Now. And Adrian is smiling because Adrian was one of our specially invited guests, and he would have heard the governor say that himself, right, Adrian? So I'm not, keep me honest here. Now, what I appreciated in Adrian being a specially invited guest is that he reminded us that digital transformation, digitization center was not the beginning, but it really started, now it would be about 6 years ago in 2019, when Fujitsu, through Adrian, really joined us at a strategic planning retreat that was aptly named Transforming Our Bank, The Journey Continues. So the whole concept of transformation has been an ongoing experience for the bank. And Adrian led a reimagining exercise with another partner, Let's Go Play. And we, the senior leaders, guided by Adrian, challenged ourselves to reimagine the bank, co-created a path towards transformation, and considered the capability needs. At the opening, Adrian reflected that the bank had intentionally been working on building the muscles, and I think Mr. Irie mentioned digital muscles during his conversation with us. I'm sorry I don't have the music as well. I'm going to have to practice that. And those muscles are needed when we talk about digital transformation. And that included having a culture that embraces agility, having an agile infrastructure, and having a digital-first leadership. And with the launch of the Digitization Center, the bank was, he reminded us or emphasized that the bank was developing a strategic capability, and it was a powerful opportunity that could set us on a new path to sustainability. And I smiled when I saw that we were referenced under business sustainability. I'm excited to say that by the end of 2025, so we launched the center in 2024. We had our first external team, and that was also through recommendation of Fujitsu, joined us in October of 2024. And by the end of 2025, that partnership would have digitized around 300,000 pages of documents from one of our key departments. And that is one of those departments that are the most, now this isn't a word, so unfortunately I'm going to be quoted, the most paperful, if we could say that. Lots of boxes, lots of documents. And that is actually the department that would have digitalized their process through Forex Online. So in partnership with Fujitsu, we have been able to accelerate the paperless bank for one of our key departments that has almost the most paper. Now, we mentioned September 2019, September 2019 with the strategic retreat. And coming out of that strategic retreat, we actually established digital transformation as a priority. And thanks to that retreat, we created the Digital Transformation Unit because it was identified as critical to have a focused unit focusing on digital transformation for the enterprise of the central bank. And so indirectly, Adrian is, it's Adrian's fault that I'm standing here today within the Digital Transformation Unit. We launched in March of 2020, which coincidentally aligned with that sense of urgency, which was COVID, where the bank, myself, and all of us in the world were trying to find a way to keep our jobs, work from home, but stay away from that little red ball that we see on the screen. And that was 5 years ago, and I don't know about you, but part of me almost can't remember that particular space. But I think the sense of urgency is very important because I think it helped us to accelerate our digital transformation efforts. Also during 2020, when we launched, the first thing we started to do was a digital signature framework, which allowed us to actually partner with DocuSign, and that is our official platform for signing all of the bank issued documents. Beyond that, you would see in the box next to it, Agile Workshop and proof of concept. And wherever you see the logo Fujitsu, there was a partnership that existed there. So again, you're going to hear his name again. Adrian and his team joined us in August or September of 2020. And this was a virtual workshop. So let me say that at that time, the Digital Transformation Unit had never worked in a face-to-face environment. We were launched just before we went live. And literally, our team of then 4 was spread across, well, the very large 166 square miles of Barbados. And so we met virtually throughout that experience. So Adrian and his team would have shared with us through the virtual space about that Agile workshop. And in that Agile experience, I met Ria, again virtually. And technically, this may be the second time that I've seen Ria face-to-face, not through a virtual session. So thanks again to Fujitsu for having this face-to-face session. And coming out of the Agile workshop, we're not agile, but we are agile-like. So we learned tenets about how to get to that minimum viable product, how to iterate in smaller cycles, and then to learn faster. And so that's why you would see an agile-like approach being one of the key things referenced when we talk about key insights. Compelling vision, I mentioned that in the paperless bank. And because of COVID, which was that sense of urgency, all departments of the bank wanted and needed to have their documents in a digital form. It's important to note that during COVID, the team of the documents we're now digitizing actually had to go into office on rotation because their documents were not yet digital. Coming out of the learning of the Agile workshop and the proof of concept that we did, and the proof of concept we did was in November of 2020, we learned a lot about, in some instances, what we didn't know and what we needed to tighten up to be able to go into a development of an enterprise content management system. We use that insight to craft the request for proposal that Fujitsu and other companies ultimately bid on, and Fujitsu was successful. We established a cross-functional team that came together and identified key use cases. We heard the word use cases being referenced as well this morning, that we needed and wanted to build into the ECM. Why? Because we wanted to have the ECM develop things that the different business areas actually needed and wanted to be able to take it forward. And that was critical for us to actually accelerate with respect to the adoption. Now, in that box, and it should be bigger than everything else because that is actually deceptively small. The development, we sent out the RFP in 2021, and in February 2022, we had our first our first discovery workshop with the wider team. You'll hear me call names because this team has, when I think about it, been along the path of our journey pretty much from the inception. We started with Adrian in 2019 with the Agile workshop. Ria was introduced and has been a key part of our journey since then. When we had the RFP and they bid on it, we met the team in 2022. Then we met Vijay, we met Chanel, and I got to hug Chanel for the first time this morning again, so thank you for that. I see her virtually very often. We engaged with Anthony. We met Dwayne Blackman, and those names are important because wrapped around that RFP, when we had the statement of works that Ria and I spent many a night discussing and strategizing over the time, it was not just looking at the development of the system, but also the strategies we needed to help with adoption. And there are two things that came out of that. The need to have an organizational change management plan and strategy, and Dwayne Blackman was part of that. And we needed a digitization framework plan. And Anthony, in partnership with Vijay, really worked on that plan. And that plan is what we use to leapfrog into the digitization center that we launched in 2024. Now, the ECM, we started as an on-prem solution. It was SharePoint on-prem. And remember that ActivateNow, the governor that I spoke to that came in March 2023, he wanted access to be more instant. And so we needed to migrate to cloud. So we transitioned and we had a migrate to cloud approach, and that took us into March 2024. To set a bit of context, and the boxes are maybe a little too faded for you to see, but the boxes at the base really outline the context of what was happening in the bank beyond those activities. So we existed in a space where we had information security. I think our CISO had many a sleepless night sometimes because he had a team of staff across the bank that were doing things in the space, but he needed to put those guardrails around us. So we have a series of phishing exercises. I've unfortunately had to do remedial training once or twice. I say resentfully, but over the last years, he's really made us a lot more aware of what we need to be mindful of, especially as we go into a space which is more cloud-driven. We, in 2021, transitioning to 2022, we also established a data governance council. And that was through another strategic partnership that we had. And from that council, we actually were able to craft our data governance framework. And that is really a composition of 3 policies that we have that would have been crafted by the Data Governance Council in conjunction with other business areas of the bank. Is the data governance policy, the data classification policy, and the data retention and archival policy. All things that fed and were poured into that enterprise content management system. Next to that, no, I myself can't even see it, so I'm going to turn. We have business process mapping. So again, when you're talking about the ECM, you have a series of use cases, you have workflows established through Power Automate. Am I right, Chanel? Good, I've passed the test. And Power Automate where the workflows exist and automate our experience as much as possible. But to be able to do that, you have to understand your processes. And so that business process mapping was important. We've benefited from business process mapping through the engagement with Fujitsu because that was part of how they translated our desires into the reality that they provided. We also have, as part of the digital transformation unit, a business analyst who is engaging with business or stakeholders or internal stakeholders, other business areas, to map their processes. Now, we're using a simple approach because what we found is that while you map the processes, the current state, people then see the pitfalls in the existing states and they automatically can think of ways to re-engineer. We're not really at the point of full automation yet, but that is the starting of building the culture where we do that. And that culture ties into organizational change management. Dwayne helped us with that. It was also part of the building capacity strategy that was imbued in the ECM project that we partnered with Fujitsu. We're still learning because, of course, change doesn't happen overnight. And as you introduce technology, the way you think about what you were doing will change, but then you have to learn to better utilize the system to do better. And we also have the M365 consultancy. That was critical with respect to SharePoint Online, because in order to be able to access the system, you needed an M365 license. The other thing I didn't mention, I have this happy construct in my hand. Again, ActivateNow, so I hope you're in part thinking of the governor. One of the things he did, because he wanted a paperless bank, well, it means that you need more people to have access to technology. And so for 300 or so staff, one of the things he mandated is that everyone needed to have a bank-issued cell phone. So that also allowed us to build security around our devices and therefore build security around the documents that we would ultimately be able to access with those devices. We are also using MS Teams, again, the M365 environment. And so there are 3 words that come to mind when I think about the ECMS and when I think about SharePoint Online and when I think about MS Teams, and honestly, when I think about Adrian and his team, so Fujitsu as well, and it's collaborate, innovate, and elevate. And I want you to hold on to that word elevate because part of the adoption strategy that came out of our ECM workshop that we had with Dwayne was the need to identify champions to help us to take the process forward. Yes, we had a project team, yes, we had a steering committee, but we actually needed additional hands on deck to really push it forward. And so one of the first things we did after that workshop, and I think that workshop was held in May of 2024, I speak subject to correction, we actually identified 15 persons across the bank that would help us to do that. Our ECM sponsor, project sponsor, Deputy Governor Michelle Doyle sent invitation letters to those 15, all graciously accepted. And in January of 2025, not too long ago, guess who? Do you know the name that I'm going to call next? Adrian joined us in January to launch the first session with the ECM champions, because you do need to build that mindset and that community around what they're going to do to take forward. And of course, we're all learning, so it's not that they're experts in the ECM themselves, but they are experts into what their departments need. And so it's to figure out with them through use cases, how can we utilize this ECMS to better make your job better and happier? One of the things that I remember Adrian mentioning during that workshop was how the role of the champions was to help us to humanize the technology. So we have ECMS, and it's an acronym, but you wanted something that really resonated with them. And so one of the first things the team did was to select a name that, if they could, they would want to be the replacement of ECMS. And Elevate is what came out, because that was the emotion, that was the feeling that they wanted that piece of technology to bring to them. In February of 2025, so again, that was this year, we transitioned our bank intranet and onboarded that to the ECMS. So it encouraged more adoption, because for you to hear about the bank as an internal staff member, you needed to go onto that ECMS. When we launched in March of 2024, so let me go forward, we were developing, and we'd been developing from February 2022. We did a migration to cloud, which pushed our end date a little further. And in February of 2024, we had a workshop with one of our strategic partners, Infotech, to really look at what we had pulled together and determine what we could go live with. At the time we sat at the table, I can definitely say I was not aware that the time to transition was March of 2024. So again, Activate Now, because my DG Doyle, is biased for action. So she already had in her mind that we were going to launch in March 2024. And so that 3-day workshop that we had, which was face-to-face, was really focused on what use cases we could go forward with that would allow the bank to bring value. One of the things we wanted persons to do is to be able to see themselves when we went on the ECM. So poor Vijay collaborated with me and our team to build sites for each business area. The sites were not necessarily all populated, but when they went on the site, they saw their name. And now what we're preparing to do later this is October. So next month we're going to launch an ECM elevation expose, and that is where we're going to have a competition for the best homepage for the departments of the bank. It's one that you volunteer in, but there are prizes to be won. And what we're encouraging different business areas to do is to identify those things that make your department you. Identify the key things that you would want other colleagues to know about your department, the key things they need to know to be able to navigate with your department, so that when they go on, they can have that information available. We are also integrating it with the digitization center, as I mentioned. In the center, we have a team of persons working. They're using 2 of Fujitsu's scanners, along with others, to actually digitize paper documents, index them, and onboard them to the ECMS. So again, adoption is being accelerated in that regard. Now, when we pull it all together, as it speaks to key insights, One thing I haven't mentioned as it speaks to those key insights, and you would have noted, is the strategic partnerships. I've mentioned strategic partnerships, but I haven't necessarily spoken to it. So let's see if there's a lag, or is it going to move on me now? Let's try again. Okay. The role of strategic partnerships. And this was a cause for a bit of reflection. When I think about a good strategic partnerships, three things come to mind. The nature of the relationship that you're building, and this is with you as consultants and your clients, finding a win-win position, and choosing your team carefully. The persons that you send out to represent you with your various clients, you need to have a good match with the client and the consultants that you have. And you need to think about how does your client base feel? What do you make them feel? When they think of Fujitsu, when they think of their teams, how do they feel? And of course, hence I saw the quote related to Maya Angelou, and it's really people, and you can quite literally find, edit, replace people with organizations. Organizations will forget what you've said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And so on your journey and on our journey with Fujitsu over the last 6 years, what the team that has walked with us has done is they've been trustworthy. 9 out of 10 times they've done what they say they're going to do. And that builds trust. And you've heard trust said. I think just every speaker that spoke today mentioned trust. It's a relationship. So trust is important. Communication is important as well, and in particular, transparent communication. Again, you don't want to tell the secrets of your respective organizations, but you do want to be upfront with what you're doing and why you're doing it. Respect and empathy. You want to understand the needs of your customer. You want to listen, not just to respond, but to actually meet the need. And in some instances, we're speaking to a need that we don't know we have. So you kind of need to be translators in that experience as well. Support, having the shared values and goals. And you'll notice certain commonalities in those 3 boxes. And I'll declare my hand as Mervyn did in his presentation. When I was looking at that, I went to Copilot and I went, okay, what key things come out? And it was interesting that the key things that came out aligned with how I felt. For finding the win-win ensures that persons on both sides of the fence are working towards the same goal. You don't want either one of the companies to feel like they're being taken advantage of. You want that the success is the success of everyone on the team across the fence. And I believe that the approach that we had with the ECMS, the Digitization Center, we've also started other discussions with other ideas that we're trying to accelerate. I believe that that has worked to our benefit, and that is part of why we have accelerated the way we have to date. Collaboration over competition. We're not in competition with each other as client and consultant. We are working towards the same objective. Clear agreements. When I think about clear agreements, the SOWs are important because it makes sure that you are aligning, you're both working towards the same thing, you're checking off the same boxes. You've heard me mention the team's names. I think the fact that I'm able to do that 6 years in suggests the journey. We may not be best friends all the time. You're not always going to agree, which is why conflict resolution is in there and mutual respect. But you will iterate towards a decision and an approach that will benefit both sides. And what I would say in closing is clients and customers, clients and consultants alike need to take, I think, the long view of any relationship. I don't believe that anything that we did in the last 6 years we could have done if we had only looked at it on a transactional basis, one box at a time. We had to look at it over the 5+ year approach that we wanted. And I think with that, because I'm conscious that we're catching up on time, I thank you for your attention.